Your Royal Highness, what was it like seeing the floods for yourself today?
At 6:18 p.m. on December 23rd, Buckingham Palace released a statement from King Charles that brought the nation's Christmas preparations to a halt. Following a medical review completed earlier that afternoon, the King confirmed news his physicians had hoped to avoid developments that would fundamentally alter the final years of his reign in unexpected ways. The announcement, notable for coming directly from the King's private office rather than the usual palace channels, immediately signaled its deeply personal significance. As staff preparing for the royal family's traditional Christmas Eve departure to Sandringham paused, journalists rushed back to their desks, and families across Britain stopped amid their holiday preparations. The statement explained that while his condition was being actively treated, it had progressed in ways that required changes to both his treatment plan and his public duties. The message made clear that the cancer diagnosis Charles had publicly shared in February 2024, once described as being successfully managed, had taken a more serious turn despite months of quiet efforts by his medical team. The hospital review that afternoon confirmed what Charles had privately begun to accept in recent weeks. The disease was not retreating but adapting, resisting treatment, and requiring interventions that would fundamentally reshape the final years of his reign. The statement continued with an unusual level of medical candor that broke decades of royal protocol surrounding health privacy, as the King revealed that his physicians had recommended a more aggressive course of treatment, one he had chosen to pursue despite the side effects that would limit his capacity and require adjustments to his public duties. As the British public settled in for what should have been a peaceful Christmas Eve, the news was met with collective shock. The BBC interrupted its programming, Sky News turned to medical experts and constitutional historians, and social media shifted abruptly from holiday cheer to somber reflection. To those familiar with palace language, the message was unmistakable. Charles was preparing the nation for a visible decline, acknowledging that his time as a fully functioning monarch was likely measured in years rather than decades, and doing something unprecedented by managing the reality of succession while still alive. In the United States, cable networks cut into Christmas coverage with breaking news banners, sparking sympathy alongside fascination with the constitutional implications for Prince William and the future of the monarchy. By 7 p.m., Buckingham Palace issued a brief follow-up confirming that Christmas plans at Sandringham would proceed and that further details would come in the new year, though the most pressing questions remained unanswered. To understand what compelled such a devastating announcement on the eve of Christmas, one must return to February 2024, when Charles first publicly acknowledged his cancer diagnosis, an announcement carefully crafted to reassure the public, while withholding the specific type of cancer and the harsher statistical realities that palace protocol and personal privacy kept out of view. The palace confirmed only that the illness was not prostate cancer discovered during a procedure for benign prostate enlargement, and that Charles had begun a regular treatment schedule. Throughout the spring and summer of 2024, he continued working while undergoing treatment, with a reduced schedule but sustained public visibility, and by autumn the palace maintained that treatment was progressing successfully and his prognosis remained encouraging. Reassured, the public largely believed the King was managing a serious but controllable condition. Behind the carefully managed narrative, however, a different reality was unfolding. Routine scans conducted in September and October 2025 raised concerns among his oncology team. While the cancer had not spread to new sites, the original site was showing resistance to the initial treatment, with cancer cells adapting to interventions that had once appeared effective. Charles's lead oncologist, Dr. Michael Ashton, a specialist in the specific cancer involved, recommended further scans and consultations with experts at leading research centers. Throughout November, Charles underwent extensive testing, each result offering clearer but more troubling insight into the disease's behavior and the narrowing range of options. These findings were presented during private meetings at Clarence House, where Dr. Ashton explained that the cancer was no longer responding as hoped. More aggressive treatment remained possible, but it would bring significant side effects that would limit Charles's ability to maintain his current level of activity. The choices were stark: continue the existing treatment to buy time while accepting a gradual decline, or pursue an intensified approach combining immunotherapy with targeted radiation, which offered better odds of control but carried risks of severe fatigue, potential cognitive effects during treatment cycles, and visible physical changes the public would inevitably notice. Dr. Ashton presented the final option with visible reluctance. Charles could choose to forego further aggressive treatment and instead focus on palliative care, prioritizing comfort and quality of life over intervention. This path would likely offer months rather than years, but those months would be spent relatively comfortably rather than enduring the burdens of harsh side effects. Charles listened to all three options with his characteristic composure, asking precise questions about timelines, success rates, and how each choice would affect his ability to fulfill royal duties. He requested time to consult his family before deciding, a request Dr. Ashton accepted while cautioning that delay itself carried risks. The first person Charles confided in was William, inviting him to a private meeting at Clarence House on December 10th, with no staff and no formal agenda, just father and son confronting an unavoidable reality. Charles explained the medical situation plainly, without euphemism or false reassurance, while William listened in silence, his controlled expression betraying tension through his tightly clenched hands. When his father finished, William asked a single, direct question: how long? Charles answered honestly, explaining that aggressive treatment might allow 2 to 4 years of functional capacity, possibly slightly longer, though with declining quality, while choosing otherwise would mean significantly less time. What followed was one of the most difficult conversations of their relationship, as William grappled with both personal grief and the responsibility of preparing for kingship, and Charles felt the weight of asking his son to bear not only the crown, but the emotional burden of witnessing his father's gradual decline. By the end of the meeting, they reached an understanding. Charles would pursue aggressive treatment, maximizing the time available to ensure stability for the monarchy. The transition would begin with William preparing more intensively for the responsibilities that would gradually pass to him. First through the transitional regency protocols recently established, and eventually through full succession. What Charles decided at that point, and what ultimately shaped his December 23rd statement, was that this process should unfold transparently. The British public deserved to understand what lay ahead, and he himself deserved the dignity of confronting his mortality honestly rather than sustaining an increasingly implausible narrative of recovery. The conversations leading up to the announcement culminated in a formal medical consultation on December 15th in a private conference room at Clarence House, attended by Charles, Prince William, Princess, and Queen Camilla, Dr. Michael Ashton, and 2 additional oncology specialists. The atmosphere was heavy with the knowledge that this meeting would determine not only Charles's treatment plan, but the direction of the monarchy for years to come. Although Dr. Ashton had prepared a detailed presentation with scans and statistical projections, Charles asked him to set aside formality and speak plainly. The assessment was clinical yet compassionate. Despite initial treatment, the cancer had definitively progressed, and while there was still no metastatic spread, a positive sign the primary site had developed resistance that rendered current therapy increasingly ineffective. The recommended course was a shift to second-line treatment combining immunotherapy with precisely targeted radiation, offering the best statistical chance of slowing progression and potentially adding 2 to 4 years of what Dr. Ashton described as functional quality time. He was equally clear about the costs, warning that the treatment would bring pronounced fatigue, intermittent cognitive effects, and visible physical changes that could not be hidden from public view. Charles absorbed this without outward reaction, though William struggled with the image of his father visibly weakened while attempting to uphold the dignity of the crown. And, ever pragmatic, asked directly about the comparative chances with and without treatment, and Dr. Ashton replied that aggressive intervention offered a 60 to 70% chance of maintaining functional capacity for 2 to 3 years, with diminishing capacity beyond that, while declining it would mean a far shorter timeline measured in months. The stark arithmetic of mortality filled the room with silence until Camilla quietly asked what the doctor would recommend if Charles were his own father, to which Dr. Ashton replied with empathy that he would advise the aggressive protocol for its chance at meaningful time while ensuring a clear understanding of what meaningful would truly entail. Charles understood that meaningful did not mean easy, and that the choice ultimately rested on what quality of life he valued most. He made his decision during that meeting, though he continued for several minutes to ask detailed questions about treatment schedules and the management of side effects. He would pursue the aggressive protocol, but with one condition that would become the most controversial element of his plan. He would not hide what the treatment did to him. Charles stated firmly that he would not ask the palace to invent cover stories or pretend he was healthier than he was, insisting that the British public deserved honesty, and that he deserved the dignity of facing his illness openly rather than behind a facade of palace deception. William immediately grasped the implications and voiced his concern, noting that announcing not only treatment but prognosis would be unprecedented. Charles agreed, explaining that he had watched his mother work herself to exhaustion, maintaining the illusion of perfect health, and he refused to repeat that pattern, choosing instead to tell the truth, adjust his duties, and allow the transition to unfold transparently rather than erupt as a sudden crisis. Princess and unexpectedly supported him at once, arguing that the alternative would be months or years of palace spin, media speculation, and an eventual breakdown of public trust, whereas honesty now would preserve dignity and stability. The discussion then turned to the practical question of timing and method, with the medical team recommending that a comprehensive review be completed first to ensure accuracy before any announcement. That review was scheduled for December 23rd, and Charles decided that whatever the results, he would share them publicly before Christmas, believing that difficult news would be easier for the public to absorb during a holiday period than at the return to normal routines in January. As the meeting drew to a close, Charles made one final request of William that was especially painful. He asked his son to begin preparing in earnest to assume powers within the next 18 to 24 months, making clear that the Regency protocol they had signed was not theoretical, but would soon be necessary. William could only nod in silence, fully understanding that his father was asking him to prepare for kingship while Charles was still alive and present, yet gradually losing capacity, a burden unlike any modern heir had been asked to bear. After the others had left, William remained with his father, and they sat together in silence for several minutes before he finally admitted that he was not ready for what lay ahead. Charles placed a hand on his son's shoulder and replied gently that no one is ever truly ready, but that William would rise to the responsibility because the crown required it, and because Charles intended to use the time he had left to prepare him. It was the closest Charles came to directly acknowledging his own mortality, and in that moment William understood that the future he had long considered distant had become the present. The comprehensive medical review conducted on December 23rd lasted more than 4 hours, beginning at 10 a.m. at a private London facility and concluding shortly after 2 p.m., during which Charles underwent advanced imaging, blood tests, physical assessments, and consultations with multiple specialists. By mid-afternoon, the compiled results confirmed what his doctors had feared. While there was no sudden spread or catastrophic change, the cancer had continued its steady progression, indicating that the existing treatment was no longer adequately controlling the disease. Dr. Ashton explained that the cancer cells had developed resistance to the initial chemotherapy, a known but serious complication of this type of illness, meaning further treatment along the same lines would bring diminishing benefits while still imposing significant physical strain. The alternative therapies, particularly immunotherapy, carried unavoidable side effects, including severe fatigue that would force substantial reductions in Charles's schedule and the risk of inflammatory complications that would require close monitoring and, at times, possible hospitalization. If complications arose, hospitalization could be required, and while the radiation would be precisely targeted, it would still cause localized skin changes and tissue inflammation that would be visible and take weeks to resolve after treatment ended. Most significantly for Charles's role as monarch, the protocol would leave him essentially incapacitated for several days each month, unable to carry out even basic royal functions, and although his energy would partially return between treatment cycles, it would never reach his pre-diagnosis level, resulting in a cumulative and unmistakable physical decline that palace management could not conceal. Dr. Ashton presented the statistical projections with professional detachment and evident compassion, explaining that the treatment offered roughly a 70% chance of controlling disease progression for 2 to 3 years, with alternating periods of relative strength and significant limitation, and diminishing odds of stability beyond that timeframe. Charles absorbed the figures quietly, understanding that this meant perhaps 2 to 4 years of functional capacity, enough time to prepare William to spend meaningful moments with his grandchildren, but not enough for the long reign he had once hoped might compensate for the decades he had waited to become king. The constitutional implications were addressed just as plainly. The transitional regency protocol he and William had recently signed would likely need to be activated within 18 to 24 months, leading to a gradual and unprecedented transfer of monarchical authority, driven not by sudden death, but by medical necessity. The public would witness a visible weakening of the king, fewer appearances, and increasing responsibility assumed by Prince William, while Charles retained the title. The final discussion focused on quality versus quantity of life, including the option of foregoing aggressive treatment in favor of comfort-focused care that might provide 6 to 12 relatively symptom-free months, a path some patients chose when treatment burdens outweighed the benefits. Charles rejected this decisively, reasoning that months were insufficient to secure a stable transition, whereas 2 to 3 difficult years would allow him to guide William and demonstrate that a modern monarchy could manage succession with transparency and dignity. By 4 p.m., Charles had finalized both his treatment plan and his decision to disclose the truth publicly. He would begin the new protocol in early January, reduce his schedule, and speak honestly about what lay ahead. The statement was drafted between 4 and 6 p.m., with Charles personally refining its language to balance candor and reassurance, determined to avoid both unnecessary alarm and evasive euphemisms. At 6:18 p.m., as Christmas Eve preparations unfolded across Britain, the statement was released, marking a fundamental shift in how the monarchy would confront illness, succession, and public trust for the first time in centuries. Prince William was at Adelaide Cottage, sitting with Catherine in their private sitting room, while the children were occupied elsewhere, when his father's statement was released. He had known the announcement was coming, and had even helped review the final wording. Yet seeing his father's words issued as an official palace statement still felt surreal and devastating. Catherine, already prepared by William for the likely outcome of the medical review, sat quietly beside him as he read the message on his phone, and when he finally set it down, she could see the grief he was struggling to contain behind his composed expression. 2 to 4 years, William said softly, articulating what weighed most heavily on him, describing a future in which his father's capacity would steadily diminish under public scrutiny, while he himself prepared to assume the role of king. Catherine reached for his hand, grounding him as she reminded him that he was not replacing his father, but continuing what Charles had built, though William shook his head, confessing that it felt like waiting for his father to die while simultaneously taking over his job, a conflict he feared would consume him with guilt and duty. There was no easy answer, as there was no modern precedent for such a prolonged and visible transition. Unlike the sudden shift that followed Elizabeth's death, this would involve years of gradual decline during which William would take on increasing responsibility while watching his father weaken. Catherine gently turned the conversation to practical matters, noting that the children, especially George, would need to be told soon, as he was old enough to understand and likely to hear about it elsewhere. William agreed, explaining that he had already spoken with his father, who wanted to tell them himself after Christmas, so they would hear the truth directly from him. William had also spoken with Harry, who had been informed earlier in the day about their father's medical review. The conversation was difficult, strained by the distance and lingering tension between the brothers, yet unified by their shared grief over Charles's prognosis. Harry's first question mirrored William's own instinctive query. How much time? William relayed the honest answer, given by the doctors, 2 to 4 years of functional capacity, maybe slightly longer, but with declining quality. A heavy silence followed on the line, and when Harry spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. I should come back. Not permanently, but I should be there more. William felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to refuse, to maintain the boundaries established after years of conflict, while another part, recalling the loss of their mother at age 12, recognized that facing their father's decline required them to be brothers first, everything else second. Come when you can, William said finally. He would want that, and so would I. The call ended without resolving their deeper conflicts, but with a quiet understanding that whatever divided them would need to be set aside while their father's time remained limited. The day after the announcement, on December 24th, Princess Anne visited William at Adelaide Cottage. Arriving with her characteristic directness, she and William walked the grounds together, Catherine wisely giving them privacy for a conversation she knew William needed, and offered no platitudes or false comfort. Instead, she gave the pragmatic assessment she had consistently provided throughout the crisis. You have 2 years, perhaps 3, to prepare for a role you will hold for decades, she said bluntly. That is a gift most heirs never receive. William reflected on how his grandmother had become queen with virtually no preparation. Princess Anne reminded him that he now had time that most heirs never receive to learn, to make mistakes while his father could still guide him, and to assume power gradually rather than all at once. William appreciated the reframing, even as he struggled to feel grateful for time measured against his father's declining health. He wrestled with questions that had no easy answers. How to support his father while preparing to succeed him. How to grieve and plan simultaneously. Anne's counsel was simple yet profound. Place duty first and process your feelings later. It was neither fair nor easy, but it was what the crown required. William understood she was right, but understanding did not make the burden lighter. He would need to be son and heir, grieving and preparing, supporting his father while learning to step into his father's role, all under the public gaze of media scrutiny analyzing every interaction for signs of transition or tension. Catherine's role in this impossible balance became even more crucial. She would need to be the private stability William could rely on while he maintained composure publicly, support their children through their grandfather's illness while shielding them from media intrusion, and prepare herself for queenship arriving sooner than anyone anticipated, shadowed by grief. On Christmas Eve, after the children had gone to sleep, William stood at their bedroom window, gazing into the winter darkness. Catherine joined him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "I am not ready," he admitted again, echoing what he had told his father. Catherine rested her head against his back. "You do not have to be ready yet. You just have to be willing, and you are." William turned to face her, the weight of the days ahead evident in his expression. "Maybe 3. That is all the time I have to learn everything my father spent 70 years preparing for." Catherine held him firmly. "Then we use every day of those 2 years. We learn together. We support your father together. And when the time comes, we step into it together. You will not do this alone." It was the promise William needed, even though he knew the ultimate burden of kingship would be his alone. With Catherine by his side, the impossible seemed merely difficult, something he had learned over years of royal duty that he could manage. As Christmas morning approached, William thought of his father at Sandringham, surrounded by family, facing what would come with quiet resolve. William realized with painful clarity that this Christmas would likely be his father's final one as a fully functioning king. The countdown had begun, not to Charles's death, not yet, but to the transition that would transform William from heir into sovereign while his father still lived, still watched, and still carried the title William would inherit sooner than either had ever wanted. For the British public, Christmas Eve dawned on a nation fundamentally altered by the King's announcement. Morning broadcasts led with the statement, bringing in medical experts to explain cancer progression and constitutional scholars to unpack the unprecedented implications of a managed royal transition. Public response, measured through instant polling and social media sentiment, was overwhelmingly sympathetic. A survey by YouGov showed that 89% of Britons supported the King's decision to be transparent about his prognosis, many expressing admiration for his courage, while only 6% felt he should have kept his medical situation private. Experts spent the day explaining what the statement meant in practical terms. Professor Helena Marsh, interviewed on BBC Breakfast, summarized it succinctly. Charles had effectively announced his own eventual abdication, not through formal surrender, but via gradual transfer of power driven by medical necessity. The recently signed Transitional Regency Protocol would almost certainly be activated within the next 2 years, allowing Prince William to assume increasing royal functions, while Charles retained his title and constitutional position. Across the Atlantic, American media emphasized the human and emotional dimensions, drawing comparisons to President Jimmy Carter's public acknowledgement of his mortality, while highlighting the differences between the British monarchy's managed succession and the binary nature of American presidential transition. The palace confirmed that Charles would proceed with the family's traditional Christmas at Sandringham and deliver his Christmas broadcast, recorded days before the medical review. Viewed in the context of his prognosis, Charles's message on December 25th took on profound personal significance. His themes of resilience, community, and cherishing time with loved ones were no longer abstract reflections, but lived testimony from a man confronting his own mortality. Palace officials began restructuring the royal calendar for 2026. Charles's schedule would be reduced by roughly 60%, focusing on major constitutional functions and personally meaningful engagements while eliminating routine appearances. William's schedule would expand correspondingly, with the Prince of Wales assuming many representational duties previously performed by the King. The Transitional Regency Protocol, once considered distant planning, was now projected to be formally activated by late 2026 or early 2027, codifying what would already be happening informally. William taking on specific constitutional powers, while Charles retained his title and the functions he remained capable of performing. Through his December 23rd statement, Charles had created a new model for monarchical succession, one grounded in transparency and managed transition, rather than sudden crisis. At Sandringham on Christmas morning, the royal family gathered with the knowledge that this holiday carried a weight unlike any before it. Charles, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, was visibly treasuring moments he now understood were finite. William watched his father with George, Charlotte, and Louis, acutely aware that his children's time with their grandfather would be measured in years rather than decades. Princess Anne, observing with her characteristic clear-sightedness, saw both sorrow and strength in how the family was navigating the crisis. Charles faced his mortality with dignity. William accepted responsibility with reluctant resolve, and the family fractured by recent conflicts found unity and shared grief. Harry, who had flown to Britain on Christmas Eve, experienced a complicated homecoming. His presence revived tensions with William and the institution, but Charles's prognosis temporarily superseded those concerns. On Christmas morning, the embrace between Charles and Harry carried urgency, a recognition that time was no longer unlimited. The public, watching from a respectful distance, understood they were witnessing the beginning of a transition that would unfold over years. Charles would remain king, while William increasingly performed the functions of monarchy. The nation would watch this gradual transfer, seeing Charles decline, and prepare for succession in a way no generation before had been asked to do. As December drew to a close, and the family remained at Sandringham, the reality of Charles's condition settled into public consciousness. This was not a crisis to be resolved, it was a managed decline, conducted transparently with the public included rather than kept in the dark. For William, the holiday was both precious and painful. He spent time with his father, aware that the doctor's projection of 2 to 4 years of functional capacity was hope, not certainty. He watched his children interact with their grandfather, creating memories to sustain them in the years to come, even as he prepared himself emotionally and practically for a role he still felt unready to assume. Catherine's support became essential. She would provide the stability William needed to navigate grief and duty simultaneously, guiding their children while preparing for her own future queenship. On the evening of December 27th, Charles requested a private walk with William across the estate grounds. They walked in silence for a time, processing the consequences of the medical review. Finally, Charles spoke, apologizing for the burden on his son and the lack of private grieving time William would face. William shook his head, reminding his father that honesty itself was a gift, granting him the rare opportunity to prepare, learn, and hear what needed to be said while Charles was still present. Charles turned to him, the emotion in his eyes unmistakable. "Use the time well," he said quietly. "Learn everything you can. Make your mistakes while I can help correct them. And when the moment comes, take the full weight of the crown. Remember, you were trained for it by someone who understood its burdens better than anyone." William embraced his father, a rare display of intimacy that crossed decades of formal boundaries. They separated with a shared understanding. The future was no longer theoretical, it was approaching, measured in treatment cycles, declining capacity, and gradual transfer of power. As they walked back to Sandringham House, William reflected on the statement his father had released on December 23rd at 6:18 p.m., a statement that had silenced Christmas Eve with its tragic honesty, but also offered something unprecedented. Charles had chosen transparency over deception, managed decline over sudden crisis, and partnership with his heir over isolated suffering. In doing so, he had created a model for modern monarchy confronting mortality with dignity. The crown's future, William realized, was no longer distant. It was present, lived day by day, treatment by treatment, gradual transfer by gradual transfer. And while the burden remained heavy, he was no longer carrying it alone. His father was still here, still guiding, still exemplifying what it meant to serve the crown, even as the crown slowly passed into other hands. The gift of time, painful as it was, might prove to be Charles's greatest contribution to the monarchy he had long awaited to lead, but would now leave sooner than anyone had hoped.